Now we will discuss the management, how we, and these are the managements are according to American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology, and Heart Rhythm Society. We will discuss one by one how we control the heart in the atrial fibrillation, how we maintain the sinus rhythm or achieve the sinus rhythm, and there is the what are the anticoagulants or how we do the anticoagulant to the patient. First of all, rate control strategies. Rate of the in the atrial fibrillation depends on the AV nodal conduction. AV nodal conduction now influences by many things, like intrinsic factors can influence the AV nodal conduction, and there are some extrinsic factors which can influence the AV nodal conduction. The most important one, the intrinsic factor of the AV nodal conduction, which are the intrinsic refractory period. Then there is the parasympathetic nervous system, which can increase the refractiveness of the AV node, and sympathetic nervous system, which can decrease the refractiveness and increase the rate of the uh, uh, impulse conduction in the atrial fibrillation. And rate controlling agents increase AV nodal refractiveness. We increase the refractory period of the AV node in the atrial fibrillation by using drugs. So what are our strategy for the rate control strategy? Less than 110 beats per minute heart rate is the rate control strategy, and this is according to the American Heart Association. The first line drug for the rate control are the beta blockers and the calcium channel blockers. In beta blockers, mostly we use beta 1 selective, for example, metoprolol. We do not use mostly the non selective beta blockers like propranolol, because in case of COPD or in case of asthma, the non selective beta blockers can increase the severity of these diseases, like asthma. Patient with comorbidities like asthma can increase the severity of the asthma or COPD. So we do not use the non-selective beta blockers, we use the beta 1 selective like metoprolol, and the dose of the metoprolol is the 25 to 100 milligram orally twice a day. We can prescribe in rate control strategies this dose. And the calcium channel blockers also the first line agents for the rate control, and most of the time diltiazem is used, and also verapamil and diltiazem both can be used, and they are the non dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers. We do not use in this amlodipine or other dipines. So what will be the dose of diltiazem? It will be the 20 milligram IV over 2 minutes. And if we achieve the rate control, then we do not repeat the dose. And if the rate control is not achieved, then we can repeat the dose after 15 minutes with 25 milligram over 2 minutes. And these two class the beta blockers, which will be this beta 1 selective beta blockers, and the calcium channel blockers will be which will be the non dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers. If these two, if we cannot prescribe these tools, or these tools are contraindicated in some patients, so we will, in some conditions, we can move to the digoxin. For example, in heart failure patient, we cannot prescribe beta blocker or calcium channel blocker, which can increase the severity of the heart failure. So we can prescribe digoxin with other therapies, with other drugs. uh, we rarely use digoxin as a monotherapy. So digoxin is mostly indicated in heart failure patient with atrial fibrillation and decreased left ventricular, or in patient with the decreased left ventricular function. What will be the dose of digoxin? in initial or in hospital setting, we use 10 to 12 microgram per kg. Orally we can use, or we can use 8 to 12 microgram IV or intramuscular in 3 dividing doses. How we use we calculate the dose of the digoxin for the patient with related to 8 to 12 microgram per kg. 50% of their dose, uh, for 70 kg man, the dose will be approximately 0.5 milligram, 0.5 milligram. With 50% of the dose, for example 0.25 milligram, we initially give loading dose. Then if the rate control is achieved, then we discontinue the drug. If the rate control is not achieved, then we will give 20% of that calculated dose to the patient after 6 to 8 hours. We can also repeat the third dose after 6 to 8 hours. Once the rate is achieved, we discontinue the drug and we discharge the patient on 3.5 to 5.1 microgram per kg orally once a day. If we cannot prescribe beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, digoxin, or these drugs are unable to achieve the rate control strategies, then we use amiodarone for the rate control, especially in patients who are tolerant or unresponsive to the other rate controlling drugs, or in patient with congestive heart failure. The dose of the amiodarone will be the 300 milligram IV over first hour in hospital setting, or initially in loading dose. Then we will give 10 to 50 milligram per hour IV over next 24, or give in the diluted form. Always remember, amiodarone is always given, should be given in diluted form. And you should also notice the every brand name contain different amount of drug or different ml of drug, and each ml contain different amount of drug. So consider the amount according to that brand name, but the exact amount is 300 milligram IV over 1 hour. You can adjust according to mls on that. So once the rate is achieved, then we discharge the patient on 100 to 200 milligram per day orally dose for the patient. In patient in which all of the strategies of rate control are failed, in that patient we will do AV nodal ablation and pacemaker implantation. Now we will talk about rhythm control strategies. What does that mean? As in atrial fibrillation, there is the irregular rhythm, and we want to achieve the same normal sinus rhythm, which is regularly regular. For that, we consider in home patients, we do the rhythm control strategies. Those patients who are hemodynamically unstable patients, are those patients which have no functional abnormalities, or there is no structural abnormalities. In those patients, we want to achieve rhythm control strategies. How many types of rhythm control strategies are? There are two types of rhythm control strategies. One is the electrical cardioversion, and the other is pharmacological cardioversions. In electrical cardioversion, our patient which present in emergency and with hemodynamically instability. Hemodynamically unstable patient means there is tachycardia, tachypnea, hypovolemia or hypotension with confusion. These patients are considered hemodynamically unstable, and we do the electrical cardioversion, in which we do this synchronized cardioversion. There are two types of cardioversion. One is synchronized, in which we give the current 100 200 joules to the patient, that synchronized with the QRS complex of the patient. In case of ventricular fibrillation, we do defibrillator or unsynchronized cardioversion, in that we don't need to compare the current time with the QRS complex of the patient, as there is no specific QRS complex in the ventricular fibrillation. So a young patient which present in emergency for the first time, or for the recurrent atrial fibrillation with hemodynamically unstable patient, we do the synchronized electrical cardioversion. Now electrical cardioversion or other cardioversion can be done electively or in emergency. As I earlier said that we do the emergency in a hemodynamically unstable patient, we do the electrical cardioversion in emergency, or it can be done with electively. Patient with chronic atrial fibrillation, we do the electrical, or patient with stable hemodynamics, we do the electrical cardioversion electively. So cardioversion will be the most successful if it will initiated within the 7 days of the onset of the atrial fibrillation, and this successful rate are the for the cardioversion are the 75%, and successful rate will increase if we use ACE inhibitors or statics, which decrease the incidence of the atrial fibrillation. Now the other type, which is the pharmacological cardioversion, we use antiarrhythmics like flecainide, propafenone, dofetilide, amiodarone, and sotalol. But the amiodarone is the drug of choice for the pharmacological cardioversion because it decreases the pro-arrhythmic effects. All others antiarrhythmics can cause arrhythmia, but the pro-arrhythmic effect of the amiodarone is less than the other drugs. For that, we use 400 to 600 milligram per day in divided doses, BD or TDS, for 2 to 4 weeks, and then we give 100 to 200 per day for continuation. If cardioversion is not achieved with electrical cardioversion or pharmacological cardioversion, we can do ablation of the that tissues which show the excitation. As we earlier mentioned that the pulmonary veins are the most common site for the atrial fibrillation. We ablate that tissue which are most excitable to achieve the sinus rhythm. So for that we can do catheter based surgery, surgical open surgery, or can we use both in those which are intolerant to antiarrhythmics patients. Now we do in surgery, there is one surgery called the pulmonary vein separation surgery, in which we separate those tissue which are excitable, the tissue of the pulmonary veins, we separate them from the cardiac tissues so that the excitation does not reach to the heart. Then what are the complications associated with the ablation of these tissues? The complications can be cardiac perforation, pericardial effusion, cardiac tamponade, vascular access complications, pulmonary vein stenosis, thromboembolism, atrioesophageal fistulas, left atrial flutter, tachycardia, phrenic nerve palsy, etc. Now, the one of the most common thing in the management of the atrial fibrillation is the anticoagulation. What is the criteria for anticoagulation? We decide whether we want to start the anticoagulation or not on the Chad-West score. There are these modalities which are included in Chad-West score. Is the congestive heart failure. Each modality has its own score, and total score is 9. In this congestive heart failure, hypertension, diabetes, diabetes and vascular disease like prior myocardial infarction, peripheral artery disease, and aortic plaque, and age 65 to 74, and sex age female 1. These are the one, and age factor. which is if it is greater than equal to 75, it has 2 score, and other thing which has 2 score are the stroke and transient ischemic and thromboembolism, because these two things can increase the risk of thromboembolic events. That's why it has 2 number as compared to the other ones. So if we count these one, this is total 10, but we consider one of these. In case of age might be this one or that one. So total score is 9. Considering this score, American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology and Heart Rhythm Society recommends the antithrombic therapy for the atrial fibrillation, or if patient is non-valvular atrial fibrillation. If the atrial fibrillation is non-valvular or valvular, a CHA2DS2 score is 0, so there is no need of antithrombic therapy or antiplatelet therapy. Like some people start aspirin, so we do not need aspirin if we have CHA2DS2 score 0. And if there is the non-valvular atrial fibrillation and CHA2DS2 score is 1, there is debatable if we should start the antithrombic therapy or not. Some people start the antithrombic therapy if score is 1, or they do not start the antithrombic therapy. But if there is a previous stroke risk or transient ischemic attack, because previous stroke risk and transient ischemic attack in CHA2DS2 score has 2 score, then if CHA2DS2 score other than these have equal to 2, we must start antithrombic therapy. What are the drugs included in antithrombic therapy? We will discuss later on. Now, anticoagulations in case of cardioversion, in case of electrical cardioversion, we American Heart Association recommends the 3 weeks before and 4 weeks after cardioversion anticoagulation therapy in the case of rhythm control strategy. Now, what are the anticoagulants, their antidotes and the dosages? Warfarin is the most common one anticoagulants, and its antidotes are the vitamin K, FFP and PCC. In case of rapid antidote, in case of to achieve the rapid coagulation or to diminish the effect of warfarin, we use fresh frozen plasma or prothrombin complex concentrate. Prothrombin complex concentrates are rapid in reversal of the anticoagulants. These contain factor 2, 7, 9, 10, to whom warfarin decrease the level of that anticoagulants. What is the dosage of warfarin? It is 2 to 10 milligram per day, and we adjust the dose according to NR. If the NR is below the we set our set point, we increase the dose, or if our INR is greater than our set point, we decrease the dose. Then there is the bigatran, which is an thrombin 3 inhibitor, prothrombin 3 inhibitor. For that antidote is adalimumab, which is the antibodies, and FDA improved its drug is dose is 150 milligram twice a day. This dose is approved by FDA. Now the other anticoagulants, there are rivaroxaban, apixaban, edoxaban. These are the factor 10 inhibitors. These are factor 10 activated factor 10 inhibitors, and their antidotes are adaxanet alpha. And these antidotes are not FDA improved, but the antidotes of the warfarin are FDA approved. And the drug of the rivaroxaban is the 20 milligram OD, and the apixaban is the 5 milligram twice a day, and the edoxaban is the 60 milligram once a day. Now we will compare the side effects and advantages, are we can say disadvantages and advantages of the anticoagulants between warfarin and the other. These one are the newer anticoagulants. We will see what are the advantages and disadvantages of these. There are several advantages of using the newer anticoagulants over warfarin. What are these? These are the fewer drug-drug interactions and dietary effects. Now, in case of warfarin, there are certain drugs which can affect its metabolism, like chronic alcohol use, phenytoin, phenobarbital, rifampin, graciofulvin, carbamazepine. These will induce the degradation of the warfarin and decrease its blood level. And there are other drugs which can decrease the level of which can increase the level of warfarin by reducing its degradation. Those can be isoniazid, valproic acid, ketoconazole, fluconazole, etc. Now, the newer anticoagulants have lower level of drug-drug interactions or dietary effects, which can increase or decrease their blood levels. Low risk of intracranial bleed in case of newer drugs, rapid onset and an offset of the action, so we do not need any bridging during the initiation or after interruption. In case of warfarin, we initially give heparin, then we start warfarin, and few days later we stop the heparin and continue with warfarin. So this effect is called bridging effect. If we do not give heparin, in some cases warfarin as inhibit the anticoagulants, which are the protein C and S, and coagulants which are two factor 2, 7, 9, 10, and the half-life of the protein C and S is shorter than the coagulant factors. So protein CS and C and S, which are anticoagulants, diminish earlier as compared to coagulants, and there is the risk of microthrombi in these vessels, and there is this necrosis of the tissues, and there is this skin necrosis in case of warfarin. In some patients, not in all the patients, if we do not bridge its initiation with the heparin. So in case of newer anticoagulants, there is no need of any bridging. No need for the periodic INR testing. In case of warfarin, we have to check the warfarin periodically after a month or two. Superiority to warfarin for reducing the risk of thromboembolic events in the dabigatran 150 mg BD or apixaban. So in case of different researches, it is improved that the thromboembolic events with the dabigatran 150 mg twice a day are less. Thromboembolic events are less in case of dabigatran dosage as compared to warfarin. So these drugs are superior than warfarin in case of that. Now these are next are the disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of the anticoagulants? They require strict compliance, means as they have not longer half-lives, so we need strict compliance so that the anticoagulants effect diminish soon. No, FDA improved several agents, as I earlier mentioned that these agents, which are the antidotes for the newer anticoagulants, are not FDA improved. No data for their use in the presence of prosthetic heart valves. In case of prosthetic heart valves or valvular atrial fibrillation, we use warfarin. But in patients those with known valvular heart disease, we use the newer agents preferably. Or due to hemodynamically significant mitral stenosis, we cannot use the newer agents. No data for their use in the pregnant or lactating mothers, children, in recent patients with recent stroke or reversible causes of atrial fibrillation, severe increase in BP, or significant liver diseases. Data is not present, it means there is fewer research related to that. Lack of reliable blood test to ascertain therapeutic level of therapeutic effect or toxicity. We not have that reliable test for them. Now, what are the goal for the INR to initiate in patients which are on anticoagulant warfarin? INR goal in most of the patient is between 2 to 3 international normalized ratio. In those patients who are at high risk of stroke or artificial heart valves or rheumatic heart disease, we give our goal of INR is 2.5 to 3.5, which is more than normal goal. And in case of elderly patients which are high risk of fall and bleeding, our INR goal is 1.8 to 2. Now, American Academy of Family Physicians, some people recommend both antiplatelet anticoagulants in atrial fibrillation, but American Academy of Family Physicians do not recommend this and is strongly not recommended to the patients of atrial fibrillation, the both at the same time. Now, what are the major adverse effects of the anticoagulant therapy with warfarin? Is the most common side effect of both are the bleeding. These factors increase the risk of bleeding, and the most important one is the previous history of bleeding. This is strongest predictive risk factor, and the others are age greater than 75, liver or renal disease. As in case of liver, there are the diminished coagulants which are produced by the liver, and the renal disease there is platelet dysfunction, so bleeding can occur. In case of malignancy, as malignancy affect the coagulation effect, and thrombocytopenia and aspirin use, it can decrease the uh, platelet effect function. In case of hypertension and diabetes, in case of anemia, prior stroke, fall risk, genetic dispositions, previous disorders related to the coagulants, supratherapeutic INR, and alcohol abuse. These are the most important factors which can increase the risk of bleeding in patient those are on anticoagulants.